guys, we are on part 5 of how we discovered that our youngest daughter had a super rare genetic condition that would ultimately take her life. After 3 months of waiting, we were finally getting in to see the neurologist. Right at the time of this appointment, Poppy had just turned 8 months old. So I want to show you guys a few videos of what Poppy was like at this age, just so you can gauge where she was developmentally. Over the past 3 months, we were doing therapies. She was supposed to be developing and getting better, but instead I wasn't seeing that. I was spiraling and going into like panic mom mode. There were a few people at the time who I think thought I was overreacting. You know, Poppy had so many of these like cute, adorable, normal baby moments, but not everyone was seeing what she was like 24/7. She was not growing and advancing, and I had concerns. So anyways, I'm just saying that so you guys understand where my mindset was going into this appointment. I felt like a few people thought I was overreacting. So my husband took the day off of work and we headed over to the children's hospital. And at this point we had learned to kind of stack appointments. So we were going to go see the pediatric neurologist, the brain doctor, in the morning. And then that afternoon we had an appointment with the pediatric ophthalmologist, the eye doctor again. We parked in the parking garage, put Poppy in her little stroller, and took her up to the neurologist's office. So this doctor, nicest guy, we are forever so grateful for him. He kind of became our new contact person, it seemed. We learned pretty quickly that he was going to be extremely helpful and make things happen. So, you know, we started off that appointment like we did with most, just kind of showing Poppy's whole life story and what everything looked like. Then we actually asked him to go over the MRI results. We wanted to get our eyes on her brain and to have someone explain it to us. What was kind of frustrating is it's like, yes, he pulled up the image, he explained that she was missing that center part of her brain, but there was no reason behind it. And that was just so frustrating. Yes, you can see what's wrong, you can see what is probably causing so many of her issues, but we don't know why that didn't develop properly. But the one thing I remember about that appointment is the neurologist, he treated me like I was the expert. Not only was he validating, but he was so thoroughly listening and he believed me. He didn't make me feel like I was crazy as a mom. And he said, you know what, like, we're gonna get you guys some answers. I asked my husband recently what he remembers about that appointment, and he remembers the neurologist really educating us about seizures, and that if Poppy showed any sign of seizure activity, to contact them immediately, because with her missing that center part of the brain, he was surprised that she wasn't having seizures already. But, you know, in my panic mode, I had just taken her to the ER a few weeks prior, and they had done an EEG brain electrode test, and they hadn't seen any seizure activity. So, but anyways, that's what my husband remembers. We had to be really aware of what seizures could potentially look like. The neurologist came up with a game plan, and he said, I am going to send you guys over to a geneticist. The pediatric geneticist, we're going to problem solve this together. I think I pushed back a little bit. I was like, you know, she's already had a DNA test, and we heard that there's a 2-year wait to get into the geneticist. And he said, you know, I'll make some phone calls. And he was good for his word. I believe it was the next day we got a phone call from the geneticist office that they wanted to see us the following week, which we were just shocked by. And I think the reason why appointments were so backed up is because we had just come off of COVID where they weren't seeing patients in person. And these are like pediatric specialists. And so these are children, which is really hard to do telehealth with. And so I think a lot of appointments were just backed up. Anyways, our neurologist was able to get us in immediately. And so we had that on the calendar. I was going to head back to the children's hospital in about a week and a half to talk to someone about Poppy's genetics. The other thing that happened that day, you know, we did go back to the eye doctor that afternoon, and they were officially able to give her the diagnosis of CVI, cerebral vision impairment of the brain. And the reason that was important is just because it was a diagnosis on paper, which is something we had to have to get special resources for Poppy. So to have the vision therapy covered by insurance, we had to have CVI on her record. The ophthalmologist was only going to diagnose that if she had the MRI, and, you know, she just had to have proof. So that happened that day. That was not surprising, but of course it brought tears. It wasn't surprising. It was just unwanted. So at this point, we felt like we had another person on our team. The neurologist was making things happen, and we would head into the geneticist the following week.